Hi everyone, this is Anna Finch from Finch Press Publishing. I hope everyone's been having a good day. In Australia, it's really hot at the moment, so hence the singlet. So today's video is actually a book review. Now, I'll be reviewing a non-fiction text. This is a book that I actually bought as a teacher reference in 2019 because I knew the year after, 2020, I was going to be teaching humanities only and geography. In this book, I used to know that geography. I bought this because geography was my weakest area in the humanities, and I wanted to make sure that I refreshed my knowledge and I had things that I could reference to in order to help me teach it. So this text actually covers a range of things to do with the physical world, so things like rivers, tectonic plates, coasts, the way erosion works, climate, weather. It also covers global issues, things to do with human population, movement, settlement, which is all part of geography, and it's also part of the curriculum for secondary. Now, as I read through, as you can see, I've got all these little sticky notes. These are for things that are relevant to specific year levels. So when I read through it, I color coded it to make sure that I found the information that was relevant to a specific year level. So from memory, pink was to do with year 7 level. So this is just entering secondary. I think it's middle year, start of middle years for, it's like middle years for Americans, but year 7. And because I was teaching year 7 to 9, I went through, found information for each of those year levels. This text is written by a British author, so there is not a lot in this that is directly connected to Australia and Australian geography. The actual geography of Australia is different to England. We have deserts. And deserts don't really feature a big part in this book. Now, again, a lot of the things in here are relevant regardless of what country you're in. Things like how to read certain maps, or how to read certain graphs or create certain graphs. Things like how erosion works. It's the basic science of it. That is relevant regardless. But the examples in here are not connected to Australia. Now, it's possible to find Australian examples that back up and you can use to support the non-Australian examples. But if you were using this to give information to students, then you would need to make sure that you have examples from an Australian context that support it. The graph side of it, not so much, because it's just a graph and you can show an example from a graph from another country. You can use an example from a graph from another country and show them how to make it, and they can do it with your support. So things like this example is for the Vostok ice core. This graph, or this particular graph and the data, you can use this as an example, especially if they had to remember what certain graphs were and what they did. You can use this as an example to help them understand the differences between the graphs. So even though it's not an Australian example, I will be reviewing this as a teacher reference and as an actual piece of reading, so a piece of literature. Start with, to continue on from the point, this book was easy to follow. I read it, took me less than 2 hours to fully read it. I then reread it to understand it a bit more, but it's a quick read. The language is easy to understand and to follow. You could potentially give this to a 15-year-old and they would understand this very clearly. You can give it to a junior, a middle year student, and they would understand the language in this. Some of the scientific words you would need to teach it, but language-wise, the language is accessible for most people. You would need to have English skills in order to read this. I don't know if it's published in other languages, but you could read this with relatively middle year level literacy, and it's easily understandable. The graphs and the diagrams in the book were clear. The explanations that came before or after were also very clear, and easy to follow and understand. So I don't do well with graphs, but the way they set it out and the way they explained each graph was easy to understand. So for readability, for literacy level, I would probably give it an 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10. Just for readability, it's easily accessible and easy to read and follow along. So 7 to 9 students could actually read this. The younger year levels may struggle a bit more, but it's still easily accessible. Content-wise, it's well written, it's well explained. It's explained using relatively simple language rather than complex scientific terms or geographic terms. So I found it easy to understand and follow. Most of my students could pick it up and read it relatively easily. And I've taught students with lower literacy levels, and they could definitely read this. Personally, I wouldn't read this for enjoyment. It's just me personally. This is not a topic I'm generally interested in. But it's easy to understand, easy to follow along. It's written in a way that I found engaging most of the time, which actually surprised me. Geography, especially textbooks and books about geography, generally don't engage me, but this did. So this was actually written well enough and clearly enough and simple enough that I could actually pick it up and read it and actually enjoy it. It's not something I would normally buy for enjoyment, but I found I enjoyed actually reading it. As an actual teacher reference, so enjoyment wise, I'd probably give it about an 8 out of 10. I found it fairly enjoyable and engaging. As a teacher or student reference, now as a teacher reference, particularly in Australia, I would probably give this an 8 out of 10. It loses points mainly due to some information not directly being relevant to the Australian curriculum. In some areas were actually a little dry, even though I found the book fairly engaging the majority of the time. Parts of it were fairly dry, but that's just based on what I actually enjoy in my own personal tastes. For students, I would probably give it a 7 out of 10, simply because even though the language is accessible and the knowledge can be relevant to students, the way the book is set out, the students would not find it engaging. They could read it, they could understand it, but they won't find it engaging. As a student text or reference, I wouldn't recommend it. I would give it a 7 out of 10, but I wouldn't recommend giving this or putting this on a book list for students. Teachers could use this and take examples from this to support student understanding or student text they use, but I wouldn't give this to a student directly unless they were actually interested in learning this a lot more than what they would be doing in a general geography curriculum. But if you actually enjoy geography, or if this is a topic that you find interesting, I do recommend it. It's interesting to read, and this is coming from someone who generally doesn't like reading things about this in this area. Found it fairly engaging and enjoyable. So I do recommend you read it if you're interested in this topic. Anyway, that's all from me. I hope you enjoyed it and hope you found this helpful. I do plan on uploading at least twice a week. If you did find this video interesting, press the like button down below and leave any comments. I look forward to reading them. If you want to be notified of when I actually upload videos, press the subscribe button. Thank you for listening. See you next time.